All right, you guys. Super excited today for our webinar here with you. Today we've got Jeremy Scott joining us. I am really fortunate to have been able to connect with him. I'm actually in a business mastermind group with him now, thankfully, to hopefully help me bring you guys the most quality, online coaching that I can bring you throughout the duration that we're working together. So without further ado, Jeremy, I just let you kind of introduce yourself, maybe a little origin story of who you are, and then I know we've only got a half hour, so just kind of go through some quick tips, and then we can have some Q&A at the end if that's good with you.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I'm from Minnesota originally. Played sports in college all through the Midwest. Did my GA in South Dakota. Eventually, made it out here to a sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where I've been the last. I think it's been 15, 16 years, something like that. My first training cert was in 2005. I've been running this business solo since 2009, 10, so about 15 years now. It's changed a lot in the space. We were around before social media, so one of the originals, basically. Now, a lot of our business is done on the internet between the app, the podcast, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all our affiliate stuff. We own a building here in North Scottsdale. Still have a brick and mortar facility, a couple hundred members, just some super awesome humans, and that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. I've been on all the platforms, worked with pretty much every brand I wanted to work with in the industry, from Men's Health to Under Armour to Nike to Reebok, you name it. Just been super fortunate. Got to travel around a lot. I get to interview and talk to a lot of super smart, amazing people, which you know makes me sound super smart and amazing, even if I'm not. So that, my friends, is kind of what we do in a nutshell. If that answers it.
Yeah, sweet. That's perfect. So just tell the people a little bit about kind of like your journey throughout, I guess, your health and wellness in general. I think I've taken a lot away from like we'll call like 20-year-old mindset versus the 30 and now like 40-year-old mindset that you kind of have. So I'd love if you kind of touch on that and talk about like training through the ages.
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural progression for most people, I think, if you're smart enough. And it's how you phrase it as you get older. It's, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. It doesn't mean like put limits on yourself, but you do things with some brains at this point. We always say you can run around a house with scissors, um, but eventually something bad is going to happen. It's like now if you're 45 years old, doing box jumps for time and speed, like, is that the most important thing you need to be doing? So instead, like most people in their 20s, it's like, again, I've been on the cover of how many magazines, and this whole business was built off, basically what it looked like, which is not really what our business is, but that's just kind of the game that we played. And so everything we did was very, um, after college, when athletics is over, it's very vanity driven based. So it's like how you look, what you can present, and that was kind of the main focus. And then as you get older, you realize, like, well, do I really need to deadlift 600 pounds anymore? And the reality is, like, well, no, I don't. At some point, you know, bad things do tend to happen. So we made a major shift of like, well, instead of spending, a 20-year-old with no major responsibilities and, a body that is basically, in fucking destructible, 2 hours a day in the gym, like now it's like, can we get more done with less? So can we still put stress on the body? Can we incorporate more of what I call the low hanging fruit, just daily mobility, walking, rucking, prioritizing rest, in these really little things. So from 20 and on, it was like, probably to 20 to I would say even, early 30s, it's kind of all gas, no brakes. And then at some point, you're like, well, I'm just not recovering the same. I'm not feeling the same. And if I want to actually build, uh, this business and a life kind of outside of this, I need to reprioritize. And so that's kind of the transition I've went through. I spend more time now doing mobility than I ever have before. I walk more now than I've ever walked. I do way less dumb shit than I've ever done. And I think, like, if you think of it percentage wise, and there's no perfect formula, but like when you're in your 20s, if 20% of your workout is mobility and 80% is you training, I think that's a nice mix. As you're 30, if you go 30, 70, if you're 40, and so on. And not saying, when you're in your 50s, you can't train hard, but I do think there's a need for functional patterns and just taking the body through full range of motion in space. And again, I'll say this quick and I'll move on. The thing about strength training, it's important. You need it for bone density. You need it just for life in general, especially as you age, because it does tend to wear away. But you do get tight. Like if you train a lot, like that's kind of the secret nobody tells you. Like your muscles do get tight. You look a certain way because of it. So your hamstrings get tight, your hips get tight, your shoulders get tight, and it's not a problem until it's a problem. So that's why I'm just a huge fan of like reverse patterns and just doing daily tissue work and mobility to keep things feeling the way they need to feel. So when you're younger, it's usually like, hey, how do I look? And then everything else is secondary. As you get older, at least for us, it's, do I feel good? And then the byproduct is of if I feel good, I can move good and then I can look the way that I want to. So it's kind of, almost in like a 180 from I would say 20 to 40.
Yeah, sweet. That's super good. And I think valuable too for kind of everybody listening as well. Talk to me a little bit about like, you touched on a little bit about the mobility piece and how training can be something that is exhausting and tiring in general. Talk to me about kind of mobility in general or recovery and recovery tools that you kind of use in your day to day to kind of help staying fresh.
Yeah, I mean, like the really simple stuff. I do a mobility practice every day. It usually ends up being like an hour. It doesn't mean you have to do all 60 minutes at once. I'm not saying you guys have to do that, but you can steal 2 minutes here, 3 minutes here, 4 minutes here, by just literally stretching your hamstrings, stretching your calves, sitting into just a squat pattern, getting up. My buddy BJ Gador kind of coins the phrase every hour on the hour. He gets up out of his desk and goes and hangs in a pull-up bar, just outside his bathroom. You can set that thing up anywhere, or just the really little like microdosing things you can do end up paying huge dividends, because so many people just wake up and go about their day. They don't put their hands over their head. They don't touch their toes. They don't move dynamically whatsoever. They don't walk backwards. They don't walk laterally. So we just try to do that like in between the day, even if it's not, prescribed in the session. I'm a huge fan of tissue work. We use all the therapy tools. The foam rollers, like the legit like rumbler rollers that actually have some texture to them so you can get some shearing in the body. I'm a fan of those. I go to a tissue guy. If you think of it as like fascia or gua sha scraping, like those types of things. I see him once a week. I've worked with him for probably a decade at this point. So he knows my body and he knows what I want to do and work on the areas that I have a hard time working on myself. I go to an acupuncture dude. He's like legit. He's the real deal, for sure. So I'll go there and it's like, I'm a believer in everything and I'll try everything. We have Normatec boots here at our house. We have the Soul Rights. We basically have every therapy tool. I do everything except like cold plunge regularly. You can miss me with that cold shit all day. I know people love it, but it's just not. I moved here for a reason. It's 120 degrees. I'll sweat. I'll be warm, and I can be miserable, but I don't want to suffer all the time. And so I walk every day. I ruck basically every single day as well. Different weights, different variations, different distances. But I do think walking is the best form of exercise, and it's the easiest one that you guys can do. And some days you got to listen to your body. And so even if I have something prescribed, on the docket, if I'm feeling like shit or tired or stressed or asleep like crap and I'm not feeling it, I can live to train another day. And so I can swap those days. When I was 20, I would just be like, excuse my language, but like, don't be a pussy and just fucking train through it. And that's not a smart thing to do when you're 40 years old, so it's just kind of knowing where you're at and knowing how you feel and just kind of auditing and assessing that each and every day and trying to increase your range of motion and keep the strength that you have, especially as you age, because that's the one thing you can do. You can keep your mobility basically until you're dead. And if you look at the stats in nursing homes, 3/4 of those people are there because they can't do a body weight squat. So that means they literally just can't support their body weight and they can't grip on anything. So if they fall, it's catastrophic. And if you look at the regression from like a walker to a cane, or excuse me, a cane to a walker to a wheelchair to bedridden, that regression is really fast. And usually people skip steps. I know nobody thinks that they're going to be there, but then all of a sudden you find yourself, you're 57 years old and it's like you really can't get off the ground by yourself. And so even though I'm not there, I try to be very mindful of like, well, I do need to train hard. I do want to look and move a certain way, but I don't want to be hurt. So at this point, that's the number one priority is like recovery And those protocols is just as important as me squatting and overhead pressing and pushing a sled.
Yeah, sweet. One thing that I kind of want to not undersell that you were talking about too is kind of waking up and feeling like shit. I think a lot of people that are live here and then also just in the groups and fitness in general can definitely relate to waking up and not wanting to move. How do you stay consistent when you're having one of those days? You talked about kind of subbing out like, hey, maybe today I'm not gonna split squat 100-pound dumbbells in each of my hands, and you're gonna do something else. But talk to me a little bit about how you like to push that envelope and make sure you're still kind of quote unquote checking the box even when you're not feeling your best.
Yeah, I mean, if you really run down, and it's like you can always get on a roller and just roll some tissue. You can always do some really basic mobility, like just sitting on the ground, or like if you sit like I'm sitting, I'm like, it's the simplest forms. And then you can always go for a walk, even a couple of steps. And I always tell people just, if you're just dragging ass at the clock, whatever time allotment you have, if it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and just say, hey, I'm going to go through this mobility flow, or I'm just going to go for a walk and move my body around. And if you're somewhere in between, and like, well, I feel, not great, but I feel good enough I can train, it's okay to like lighten the loads and cut the sets and reps down. It doesn't matter. We think of load oftentimes as the only variable, and it's not. Like you can get a lot done with speed, with tempo, and with the varying volumes, time under tension, altering range of motion. You can do those things. So I really just go by how I feel. Most of the time, I don't swap entire days unless I did sleep like shit or like 14 different things came up. I would always have my mobility done, and if nothing else, like weather permitting here, I put on a ruck and I'm like, I'll just move around. If you think about it, it's almost as easy as walking. It burns damn near as many calories as running. It's easy on the joints, and it's something, you can always do.
Cool. Yeah. DJ, go ahead and unmute yourself if you got a question. Sorry, I meant to tell everybody too.
Oh
If
yeah,
you have one, maybe just like preface in the chat and then you can unmute and then we can go for it one at a time.
awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. I have a couple questions. One, I can relate to some of the things you're talking about as a guy who's turning 48 next month. Like how it changes from your 20s to your 30s to your 40s. Like I do feel like I'm still trying to do some things that I did in my 20s and 30s, and it's like I just physically can't do it, and it's frustrating. But actually working with Blaze on this continuum piece of like, it's okay, you do what you can do and all that stuff. But so I appreciate you saying that. I have two questions. The ruck, I know I could Google it quickly, but can you just share what that is? And then the second question is around walking. I've just been, we just bought a tread recently, and my wife's even just been doing walking and like walking on the tread, listening to podcasts, walking, watching like some kind of TV. I keep going back to like this idea that walking is just as good for you, if not better for you, than so many other like active things as far as weight loss and others. Just some thoughts on that. So I know I said a lot there, but maybe you could break those two things down.
Yeah, the ruck is just it's just like think of it as like what it's just you walking with load. So if it's a backpack with some weights in it, cool. We work with the Go Ruck people, so we have like the weight vests, we have the plate carriers, we have the full backpacks. Just you guys walking with any external load. I'm a fan of. I mean, if you want to do farmers carries, cool. It's just like your grip will die, before you probably can get long enough for the most part. But even that, like for some people, the basic stuff like, hey, I'm gonna grab a 20-pound dumbbell and you just keep exchanging hands for a half an hour. It's a big enough pain in the ass. But if you can put, again, they make really fancy stuff. But if you guys take a backpack, what I would say is if you don't want to spend the money, get a backpack, put some yoga blocks in the bottom, put a dumbbell or two on top of it so that it sets up a little bit higher, closer to your thoracic spine, and just walk around, because it literally is damn near as many calories as running, depending on the load that you put on, and it's much much easier on the joints. It's the low hanging fruit. And the same thing, like if you're gonna walk, it's just even more beneficial. Now there's some days where I just walk, and then there's most of the days where I put the pack on, and basically I put the pack on every day. It just depends on how much load I'm going to do, but this is what I do, for a living all day. If I was a normal person, like you just walk your dog, you're walking your dog. If you have a treadmill, that's cool. I mean, if it can go on an incline, awesome. We have like the Woodway treadmills, so the ones that you can only basically sprint on. You can walk on them, but they're sprinting treadmills. If I had a normal one, you just plug in. Incline is great. Walking forward is great. Walking backwards is amazing, especially for knee health. If you're talking like, can I get actually blood, to the front of the knees, strengthen the VMO. You can lateral shuffle. All those things I think are ideal. And again, anytime you can add any load to it whatsoever, it's the one thing you can probably do until you're dead. And I would tell people it's what we don't do. If you look at the statistical numbers, I think they put like the trackers like on the Amish, and they like most of those guys are walking 20,000 steps a day. Some of the ones who are more active, it's like 30,000, and they had some psychos who are like at 40,000 because they just work all day. Or we just basically sit in hip flexion for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours a day, and we're never in hip extension. So I think the more often you can be in hip extension, walking, and those types of things, the better off you're going to be.
Cool. Yeah, DJ, I appreciate that. Another thing that I know people have used instead of like going with buying a rucksack is they'll buy like a thing of wood pellets, like Traeger wood pellets, and they'll throw that bag inside of a backpack. So it's almost like that. Those wood pellets will kind of morph to your back and be kind of comfortable too. So another thing that you can look into if you're interested in that also. So just trying to pivot a little bit, Jeremy, tell me a little bit about let's say you're on a fitness journey, and this may not have happened to you, but I'm sure it's happened to some people that you either coach or have been around as well. And you've kind of like lost your way. You've kind of lost your path. You've been like, hey, I don't know, what I'm doing anymore. Or maybe you had this kind of epiphany moment. So what did you do to kind of get back on track when you had that happen? Or what have you helped other people to do if they had that occur to them?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of the people, it's just what are the goals, right? Like what is fun to you, what is cool to you, what is important to you now. And those shift and change for sure. They have for me, just like they have for probably most of our clients. I'll joke and I would say like I would like my brain part of it from like when I was 22 years old, where I thought it was super cool for people to tell me like I was fit and to like be on the cover of magazines and like work with all these companies like I use. And then not that I'm not thankful for it and appreciative of it, but I don't really give a fuck at this point in my life. Like there's certain things like I'm not motivated by it, I guess is what I'm saying. And so it went from like, well, this is super motivating, so I'm going to go in the gym, I'm going to die to look this way because it's going to bring all these opportunities. And it has, but it's not my main focus anymore. And so I had to like shift my brain from like, well, you don't have, it's like, if you want to think of it like different modes, like you were a beast and now you're like a warrior. And like a beast is something that just like all gas, no brakes. And then a warrior is like, can make it the duration, can make what's sustainable for the long haul. And so it was just a mental shift of like divorcing my brain of like, well, I don't have to beat the shit out of myself every single day to be fit and to be healthy. And I think for most people, if you guys are listening, like you're more done with less. And I think if you shifted things, it would probably be for your benefit, especially if you're enjoying them and you like them. So if you don't want to do, whatever you used to do, you don't have to. Fitness is super fluid. There's a million different ways to be fit. It's just divorcing your mind from like what you thought it had to be and what it was to be through that. But the one thing you do have to just commit your mind to is like you do have to move. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I'm not saying you have to go jack steel every day or go do yoga or go run a marathon, but you have to do something and you have to move your body with purpose, and it has to be important. That's why I do think having a goal and a community and a coach is probably one of the most vital things, especially if it's things you look forward to. So it's like, hey, I hate doing all these forms of exercise, but hey, I like pickleball now. Then you can do mobility, walk, maybe lift weights once or twice a week and do your pickleball shit, whatever it may be. Mine had to go from hey, I don't have to, barbell lift 1,000,000 pounds every day. I have to dedicate some time to mobility and walking because, at 40 plus years old, I probably shouldn't be, dead sprinting all the time if that's not what I'm training for. And when I was 25, you could kind of get away with it. So hopefully that helped answer.
Yeah, for sure. Does anybody else, Sabrina or Andrew? I see that you guys are on. I'm not sure if you're there. Do you guys have any questions right now that you want to ask him before I fire off a couple that I got from other people?
You kind of touched on this, but I'm in my 20s, right? I spent majority of my life weight training for sports and all of that. And so like now we're doing a lot of more mobility exercises, and Blaze sends great workouts. But I still have that like in my head. What are some things that I can like think through, or what kind of steps should I take to get away from that feeling like I need to weight train, I need to make sure that I'm, lifting more than I was last week, and just getting over some of those like mental blocks.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm again, like I lift at least 4 days a week. If you want to count the other stuff, there's probably 5 days where I have actual load on the body, but just in a smarter way. So, and this for me. I'm not saying for everybody. I do way less barbell stuff than I've ever done before. So I just think dumbbells for you guys, it's safer.
Mhm.
And the old mentality of like, well, I have to lift heavier than I did. Again, it's one metric for sure, but at some point you are going to reach a pinnacle. I don't know if it's when you're 32 or 34 or 28, where it's like this is the day you deadlifted the most you'll ever deadlift, and there's just
Yeah.
not this progression of like I'm always going to be stronger, because at some point it's diminishing returns. It's
Mhm.
like can I squat or deadlift this, but what will it cost my spine and hips in 5 years? And instead of thinking of it as like just the load, you know, maybe it's time under tension, or maybe it's the volume at which you train with, or instead of, hey, I'm lunging with, 50-pound dumbbells in each hand for, 20 reps, can I just do body weight walking lunges for 5 minutes and like cut the load down of whatever you're lunging, just for an example. What we do a lot is, if let's say the things that really crush people that are tough on the tissue, and it still makes you very strong, it's just easier on the joints. If you could do like, let's say, bench press with like 100-pound dumbbells for 10 reps, we cut the load in half, take it to like 50 pounds, and say, hey, we're going to press these for a minute straight. There's as many reps as we can get in quality, slow, full range of motion for a minute on, a minute off for the 4 sets. Or you could have done your 100-pound dumbbells for the sets of 10 the same. Now you're doing 40 reps versus probably like, you know, 80 reps. But I do think the amount of hypertrophy you get, the amount of tissue stretching and damage you get is going to be amazing. It'll let your body grow, but it's much easier on the joints for you guys. So I do like to divorce the brain from like, hey, I know I used to always lift this, but if I change it this way, I think it's a healthier option long term.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. I think I've also had to do a similar divorcing my mind from that as well, Sabrina. So you're definitely not alone on the front of thinking weight is king. Andrew, do you have anything else that you want to ask him before I kind of fire off from some people that weren't able to make it?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, no, I think we're good. You can go ahead, Blaze. I think it's been really good. I'm thankful for you sharing your knowledge here, Jeremy.
Cool. So a couple people were just asking a few more things, Jeremy, that we weren't kind of able to get to. A couple of these are nutrition, I guess, questions in general. Vanessa wanted to know what you typically eat in a day. And then Ricky, who wasn't able to be here, also is recently a vegetarian and wanted to know any advice that you'd have for somebody who's taken that kind of path moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I eat usually like once or twice a day. A lot of times now it's probably been twice, like a smaller meal and then a bigger one, usually in the evening. The one, if I eat earlier, it just depends on my schedule. It's basically protein and produce and water. I don't go super crazy. If I can be at home, it's probably different. I'll do like eggs, egg whites, chicken, maybe a certain kind of oatmeal here that we eat, chia seeds, blueberries, all these types of things in that, almost like a superfood oatmeal. And that really just for the carbohydrates, that, and then the fiber. But if I'm like if I'm moving around and I'm not here, same thing. Hard-boiled eggs, like a zero sugar beef jerky, blueberries, blackberries. Maybe I'll grab like an almond butter packet or something super simple. And then dinner is where like we eat typically more, or at least I do. We work with a company that ships us most of our meals during the week. So any chicken, steak, beef, ground turkey, you name it, we do it all. And I eat quite a bit. And then depending on the day and my training, I'll do like cauliflower rice, vegetables, real potatoes. I'm a fan of as well. If I need something denser, like I'm a fan of the Ezekiel products. I eat way more peanut butter than I probably should. But that in a nutshell is pretty much most of my weekly stuff. It's nothing super crazy. It's just it's high protein. The carbohydrates can be higher on the days where the output's higher and lower on the other days. Once a week, I typically eat something that's not kind of in the schedule. But that's it. It's not rocket science. It's protein, produce, water, and I just kind of wash, rinse, repeat. I feel the best doing it that way. The biggest thing, I just make sure like, hey, am I getting enough fiber in? Am I getting enough, micronutrients in my day every day? And what was the other question, sir?
Yeah, you're good. Any type of recommendations or advice for somebody who's going through like a vegetarian diet and eating that way, all the time and just made the change?
Yeah, it's tough, man. We always tell our people to eat meat, but if that's what you're not doing, if you can do vegetarian, do they do? I'm trying to get them, not getting confused. Do they do eggs and egg whites? Because that's like those are game changers. If you don't do eggs and egg whites, life gets real tough. There's a lot of good healthier options. Like Koya makes some great, plant-based drinks. Vegas Sport has a bunch of stuff. It is hard because if you're trying to get enough, essential, proteins, it can be done. If you want a resource, there's a guy, is it Tori? I'm trying to think if Tori only does that now. I can send you his info. He does it. He's jacked. He does it the right way. The thing that's hard about it is when you travel and you're on the road or you're in an airport, you just have shittier options if you get stuck somewhere. But if you can find the complete proteins that are either plant-based, which they're, again, like the Koyas and those guys, I think it helps. And if you can do any type of if vegetarians do eggs or egg whites, I think those are game changers, just because it's really hard if you're a dude to get 120 protein through just broccoli, man. It's really, really rough. And I think sometimes people have to add so many other things with the meat substitutes and those. I'm not a huge fan of them just because it's like they have 8 million ingredients versus just like chicken is chicken is chicken. So find the healthy supplements around it, and then the things that agree with your body. But it is definitely it is harder. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it.
Yeah, cool. I appreciate that. That's yeah, a lot of the similar things, echoing the difficulty in the protein intake, as well as just your general, like, impossible meats might not be the most minimally processed type of thing that you're going to eat, right? If that's packaged up. So definitely can echo that same sentiment there. One last thing that I kind of want to ask you, unless anybody else has anything to kind of go off of, is, if you're somebody new to a health and wellness journey, and you were able to give them kind of one piece of advice, especially somebody in the beginning, what is something that's actionable that you'd say to somebody so they're kind of getting off on the right foot?
Whatever you do, I mean, it's going to change and shift as your life and your body changes and shifts. There's ups and downs. There's shit that's going to go wrong, regardless of all the awesome stuff that you do, and even that you don't do. But we try to tell our people, like, if it's not sustainable, it's not attainable, especially long term. So if you're doing something where it's like, hey, I'm working out 10 hours a week, but you got a job and you got 2 kids, that's probably not realistic for the next 25 years. So you have to find something that is sustainable for you to do for the long haul. And for most people, if I'm generally speaking here, fitness, if you eat protein, produce, and water most of the time, you're going to be healthy, especially if it's real, minimally processed organic food. If you can work out 3 times a week, like legitly, like 3 by 52, 3 times a week for 52 weeks, and those 30-minute blocks or however long you spend, you like really train. And the other days you just walk and you do mobility, you'll be super successful. It's a recipe for success for anybody. If you want to be, more extreme than that, and obviously you have to spend more time. But for most people, I just think when you look at the allotment of hours in your week, spending 7 hours a week, doing fitness for most people is probably not realistic, especially, based on what you have going on in life. So find the minimum effective dose you can commit to that you'll never, say, hey, I can't make it, or you'll throw an excuse up why you can't do it. So that's why I say just set the bar, like, this is what I'm literally committing to. Sign the contract with yourself. start from there. And if, there's things you like and you enjoy, you can always add them in later, but just commit to the minimum effective dose you can to be fit for life.
Cool, man. I really appreciate it. Is anybody else that's kind of live here have any other last minute questions for Jeremy before we let him go? Sweet, crickets.
Oh, I was gonna say this is super helpful. I don't know if you can see them, Jeremy. I just put a couple comments in the chat that I thought were really powerful, just like the protein, produce, water, just kind of keeping that in mind. And then I really like what you just said about minimum effective dose, like really getting your baseline of what you can do. Cause I think, I just feel like based on this group, I know there's a lot of former athletes that are in Blaze's group. I am not one of those former athletes, athletic, but not an athlete necessarily. But I think it's really important, like the setting that baseline and saying, I will do this at a minimum. And I think I just like that has a really catchy phrase there, minimum effective dose. So thank you for that and everything.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Cool. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. We'll everybody else who will record this and then post it up to the page. But if you guys have any more questions for me or Jeremy, let me know and I can try and get those over to him. And then we will get together again next week.
Thanks, guys.
Sounds good, dude.
We'll
Thanks,
see
guys.
ya.
Peace.